To the December 6, 2023 regular meeting of the Holland City Council. I'm Mayor Nathan Box, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Present.
Vreeman.
Here.
Raymond. Here. Corbin. Here. Soul. Rowan. Here. Shea.
Here.
Schulteis.
Present.
Mayor Box.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. We're going to begin this evening starting with an opening prayer and followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance. We would invite you to join us if you are so inclined. Please pray with me. Lord, thank you for a wonderful holiday season, for all of the seasons that are celebrated throughout our community. Let us take this time to celebrate the joy of being a community that works together. Lord, give us ears to hear this evening. Give us minds to discern, and help us do the work that you have prescribed for us for the people of the City of Holland. Help us make good decisions. Help us talk with one another. Lord, in your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next items on our agenda are what are called our consent agenda items. These are items that are considered to be fairly routine. They have been reviewed by council members as part of our packet, and they will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the public or a member of city council asks to have an item removed from the consent agenda, and in that instance, it will be placed in its regular order on the regular agenda. But before I ask if anyone would like an item removed from the consent agenda, Kathy, would you please review that for us?
4A, absence excused. 4B, approval of minutes, November 15, 2023 regular meeting, and November 29, 2023 study session. 4C, oaths of office. 4D, city attorney, proposed ordinance to allow payment in lieu of taxes development agreement and municipal services agreement. Final adoption, December 20, 2023. 4E, city clerk, claims filed against the city. 4F, city clerk, adopt resolution, Holland Museum, special event liquor license. 4CG, city clerk, elections precinct consolidation. 4H, community neighborhood services, Ottawa County Recycling Drop-Off Center grant, memorandum of understanding. 4I, finance, 5-year historic preservation easement. 4J, finance, September financial reports. 4K, Public Safety Services, approval of radio headset and helmet purchase from On Duty Gear LLC. 4L, Management Administrative Services, approval of furniture order for the Waverly Fire Station. 4M, Management Administrative Services, Neighborhood Enterprise Zone, certificate application for Downtown ID LLC, 317 Central Avenue, adopt resolution.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Is there any member of the public that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none. Any member of council that would like to have an item removed from consent and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none there either. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the consent agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Raymond. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Yes.
Vreeman.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Rowan.
Yes.
Shea.
Yes.
Schulteis.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Under the Open Meetings Act of the State of Michigan, we provide the public the opportunity to speak to not only the City Council, but all of our boards, committees, and commissions in our open meetings. We do have some guidelines in regard to public comment. First, each person is allowed to speak only one time. You are limited to 5 minutes, and there are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. There's a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. The green light means you're doing well on time. The yellow light means you have 1 minute left, and the red light means that your time has expired, and we are strict about that. We also want to remind you that this is one-way communication. This is an opportunity for you to speak to us and to tell us what you think is important. We don't answer questions during this time, although staff may be able to circle back if you have a specific question about an issue, nor do we engage in discussion at this time. But again, it's an opportunity for you to speak to us. We also ask that during the general public comment period, that you speak to items that are not otherwise, that do not otherwise have a public hearing. And we do have 2 items this evening that have public hearing. Those are under agenda item number 7, the city master plan, and the industrial facilities tax abatement for LG Energy Solution Michigan. There will be separate public comment periods for those particular issues. So if you're here to speak about one of those issues, please wait until those come up on the agenda. But having said that, if there's anyone here who would like to speak to council in regard to an item that does not have a public hearing, we ask you to come up to the podium. Please state your name and the municipality in which you live for the record. Is there anyone here who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Ann Henriksen, Zeeland. Good evening, Council. You are beginning your journey as the government of Holland. As I mentioned in the last presentation, I will be advocating for our religious freedoms and how in the the last 4 years, this has been neglected. It is our hope that this will be rectified by this council. Please remember that the mayor's position is one of leadership, but the mayor's vote has the same value as yours. It is equal and just as influential. Unity and integrity is paramount, but truth and right for the community outweighs them. Don't be swayed. Do your research and vote for the community, those you represent. Contact them and make sure they know the truth you stand on, and for their sakes, and for no other reason. It is a government, not politics, that this community deserves. One thing the mayor can do is make declarations to designate a certain issue or cause for the month. He does this independent of your considerations. You do not have to agree. He makes these declarations based on his own decisions. He may on occasion ask you to highlight something dear to your heart. Last year in November, the community emailed and called Mayor Box, asking him to celebrate faith in the month of April. He pledged to do that, and we had a successful 2023 April Faith Month with events outside our church walls into public spaces. The culminating event was the National Day of Prayer, hosted by the Greater Holland Zeeland Mayor's Prayer Breakfast Committee. I would like to thank Mayor Box for his thoughtful response to my recent email requesting he declare April Faith Month 2024. It is our hope this declaration will be done in the first April council meeting rather than the last, as it was last year. It is important to the community. April Housing Month is also a declaration he makes, and may we suggest it be made at the last council meeting in the month of April 2024. I'm sorry to say, in 2023, many of Holland public services and institutions resisted April Faith Month, including Hope College. The Herrick Library and the library system ignored it, and so did the Holland Museum. Boys and Girls Club in the Holland Public Schools did also. Why? The Be Nice programs they support does not allow religious expression because it appears to offend students in the DEI protection system. Did they ever study the effect of faith in a higher being actually produces a more stable and prosperous identity as a person? What they do celebrate in these public institutions is June, LGBT plus teaching and sexual ideology to children. They can do this because of the past law's separation of church and state. 2022, these laws became null and void by the Supreme Court. And now that we know that, now we have freedom for our religious rights. As you know, the City of Holland Human Relations Department is labeled DEI, which all stems from the DEI ordinance. In 2019, at this first meeting in December, LGBT plus identifying persons were invited to the city council. The majority were not residents and spoke for hours how they were afraid to live here. The community had no idea this was taking place because it was Christmas and they were busy with their families. Only Mayor Box, Councilperson Lynn Raymond, Pro Tem Council Corbin, and Councilman Byrd were present at the time. It was like a well-planned drama. The time was right. It was delayed for a vote because of COVID. People traumatized from a disease, again, were not concerned about a well-written state of Michigan ordinance adopted by the City Council of Holland. Since the recent election campaigning, many people are aware of the workings of the government of Holland. Our human rights of religion for ourselves and for our children made in God's image are firing people of Holland up. There is a growing distrust of the City of Holland government. Keep it in mind as you make your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Claire Hybor, and I am representing the Holland Museum. I live in Holland Township. LG Energy has recently announced that they have purchased the Old Wing Mission property. I'd like to bring to your attention the historical significance of Old Wing Mission. There are two important factors. First, the mission was formed in 1839 and lasted for 10 years. The Ottawa Band of Indians purchased 1,360 acres and named the mission in honor of their chief, Joseph Wakazu's brother, who had recently died and was also a chief. Wakazu's band had 300 members at that time. Reverend Smith served as agent and was the only Indian agent in Michigan to be supported by the government. All other missions were supported by churches and other private entities. He built a log cabin first on this site. The frame-built home he built in 1844, 1845 is the building that we have here today. The mission consisted of a log cabin, which was later used by Isaac Fairbanks as the agricultural agent that he lived in, Smith's framed house, a school, and a church, plus the Indian wigwams. So it was a larger entity. The second historical fact is that Albertus Van Raalte was planning on settling in Wisconsin. After meeting Judge Kellogg in Allegan, the judge encouraged Van Raalte to visit the mission, which he did on December 31, 1836. After exploring the area for several weeks, he decided to make this area the home for the Dutch colony while staying here at the Old Wing Mission. As urban sprawl and development make more and more places look the same, it becomes important for communities to keep their identities intact. We all know how much Holland is proud of its history. We have Old Wing Mission documents with books, numerous articles, and even Reverend Smith's and his wife's diaries. But places give us an understanding of history that no document or evidence possibly can. It's easy to erase, pave over, and many, many sites have been lost from our landscape and memory. If we allow this property to be erased, what will be next? What is the value of the Van Raalte farm? What price do we place on our history? Just imagine. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
My name is Chanda Miller. I'm appearing before you tonight as the chair of the Board of Trustees at the Holland Museum. I am a resident of Park Township. I would also like to address the Old Wing Mission and the upcoming decisions that will be made about it. Holland has an exceptional sense of history, unusual in many, many communities in this country. It is one of the things that binds us together. It is part of the mission statement of the Holland Museum that we preserve our past. It is our understanding that decisions regarding the Old Wing Mission would be involved in the third phase of the development of LG's expansion. That is excellent because it allows time to evaluate, collaborate, and determine a course of action that will best serve all sides of this question. I am going to be so bold as to propose to you that any agreement between the city and LG regarding this third stage would contain a provision addressing a plan specifically for the Old Wing Mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, sir. Please come forward. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Good evening. My name is Rick Bosch, and I live in the city of Holland. And I'm a volunteer at the Holland Museum, and guess what I'm going to be talking about? I am looking more at the future of what we should be doing on this site versus my two colleagues who are talking more about the past and also the present. This is an opportunity that I think we have that we quite often don't have, that where do we go with this, where we have a historic building that's literally the oldest building in Holland, one of the oldest in Western Michigan, and what should we be doing with this? The first thing I do recommend is making sure that we obtain this building. Working with LG, it's sounding like that's the direction that we're going, and I really am happy about that and want to commend both LG and the City of Holland for moving in that direction, and hopefully we can get that done in a little bit. Next thing is, what do we do with the building? LG is building a multi-billion-dollar complex, and it's right next to where the Old Wing Mission is right now. Is there a possibility to build a small park there? Perhaps. Is it something where we're better off moving it to a site where it's more secure? Because I just don't want it to be next to this giant factory surrounded by a fence and nobody can get to it. So I really like the idea that I've heard circulated, moving it to Van Raalte Farms. That's a great opportunity. That's the land that the Old Wing Mission, that's how it looked, back 150, 160 years ago. So I think that would be something that really the City of Holland and LG really should be considering. The third thing is, if you do move it, what do you do with it? This is something that I am sitting here thinking that when you looked at the Old Wing Mission site, like Claire said, it was multiple buildings. It just wasn't the house. That was where Reverend Smith lived. But why don't we look a little bit more? There were some cabins there. There was a barn there that, believe it or not, actually burned down during the fire in 1871. And then there was also another building that served as a school and also as a church, and sort of as almost like an all-purpose building. And that's something that if we were to move the Old Wing Mission to Van Raalte Farms, perhaps we would want to build something like that to serve as an all-purpose building during tulip time. And a lot of people would probably be interested in visiting the Old Wing Mission. You could use that sort of as a visitor center. Otherwise, the ODC Center could use it. The park system could use it. There's so many opportunities for something like that. And we know what that building looked like at the Old Wing Mission, and I think it's something that quite easily could be constructed. And I think that's something that really should be considered. And fourth but not last is, I was talking to Bob Zwieringa, who many of you may know as the extraordinary historian that we have on Holland history here. He couldn't make it tonight. But when he and I talked, we really were thinking that we really do need to do some archaeological work. This could be as simple as just starting off with looking at just doing some ground penetrating radar, figure out where the houses were, figure out if there are any other archaeological things of interest, and last but not least, make sure that there are no human remains on the site. We know that Reverend Smith moved his children that had died there to the old Pilgrim Home Cemetery. We know that the Native Americans had a cemetery by Heinz Pickle, but at the same time, for those 5 years after the Dutch moved in, several hundred people died, and they literally were buried all over. And it's a possibility that some of these could be at this site. And if you're doing construction of the magnitude that LG is doing, in conjunction with the City of Holland, I really think it'd be a good idea to do this, ground penetrating radar, among other things, and just make sure that nobody, is there that, could cause some, significant delays in the project. So that's kind of my ideas on where we should be going with this. I think of it really as an opportunity. It's something that the City of Holland and also LG and also those of us who are concerned in the community could work together to come up with something really, really good. And instead of saying good luck with this, I am going to say if something comes up and you need my help, just give me a call. I'm more than willing to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a gentleman in the back who's been waiting patiently. I'll recognize you next. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Yeah, Charlie Vanderbrook, Park Township. And I just have a procedural question. I don't know what's happening here in terms of when discussion can be done and when it can't. So we're starting to talk about the LG, but will there be another opportunity in the open meeting to talk about this? Or where are we in this, I guess I'm wondering, where are we in the project in terms of what are we trying to talk about?
We generally don't answer questions during this time period, but there is nothing before the council at this time that deals with the Old Wing mission.
Okay, so then I would just like to say a couple of things about it, if this is the right time to do that. Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Well, so I'm a sixth-generation Hollander, and I just want you to think about coming here in 1840s, woods, a few Indians, Isaac Fairbanks, a couple other people. I got to stay somewhere. I'm Albertus Van Raalte. So the Reverend Smith put him up. This is the beginning of everything from Kalamazoo up past Grand Haven. It's the history. Unfortunately, I was too young to do much about losing the Van Raalte house. He's a relative of mine, and other relatives will be talking. But we celebrated, and I think Keith was there for the park. And how great is it to have that park? I mean, it is an amazing thing for Holland. It's an amazing thing for everybody. I was thinking that this is really a bad thing with the Old Wing mission, but maybe having LG come board and help us fund this and make it really a place that really says this community is one that can work with industry. We're different than other places. We don't have to fight this out. Let's use LG, if possible, to help us make this even nicer than it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, sir. Please come forward. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Yeah, I'm Steve Vanderveen, and I live in the city of Holland. I'll be short. Hi, Keith. I'm here to advocate for the preservation and the celebration of the Old Wing mission. I don't have to say much. I really appreciate what others have said. I just want to say here's an opportunity for us to celebrate the Ottawa, or the Adawa, and to celebrate our colony's founding. And we don't have that many opportunities left. I mean, this is the building where it all took place, and I don't want to lose it. So I again advocate for the preservation and the celebration of these cultures and this place.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council? Yes, please come forward. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Hello, my name is Wendy Langland. I live in Hamilton in Heath Township. I'm a teacher at Wakazoo Elementary and a concerned historian. Like many of my friends have said, I'm here out of interest for the Old Wing mission. I think many great points have been brought up. The biggest one being that its historical significance is unmatched. We don't have any other site in Holland that is as well documented and explains as well the interchange between the settlers and the Native Americans at that time. I would strongly encourage anyone interested to read the diaries of the Smiths in this book, Old Wing Mission. One of its co-editors, Mr. Van Apeldoorn, is here right now, in fact. And it is the diary entries of the Smiths, and it talks about their day-to-day interactions with the Ottawa. I believe the site where Old Wing sits has a sacred element to it. The Smiths eked out a life in the harsh wilderness with a people that they came to love dearly. You've heard that several of the Smith children passed away from illness and were buried on the site. It's my understanding that those human remains have been moved to Pilgrim Home Cemetery, but I do believe there is the potential for other human remains to be on the site as well. And like has been said, I think that needs to be explored very carefully. So I would ask that as we move forward, that we make sure to take our time to honor history and make sure that it's not rushed, that the completion of a phase is not rushed because of an external source's timeline. This is our history. We owe it to everyone of the future to preserve it the very best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? I see Mr. Zylstra heading toward the microphone.
I didn't want to take anybody's other time, so.
And Mr. Zylstra, would you please state your name and
Sure.
municipality for the record?
So my municipality is the City of Holland. My name is Doug Zylstra. I live at 152 East 24th Street, and I am the County Commissioner for the City of Holland. Mr. Mayor and Council, I want to stop by. Devin, how you doing? Yeah, how you doing, neighbor? Nice to see you. So I want to stop and give a quick update. It's been an interesting month or two at the county board. First thing is the Adeline Hambley removal hearing. It's been going on nearly 2 months now. Currently on pause, which I think is a good thing. Both sides are working to see if there is some sort of global settlement that involves dismissal of the charges from the removal hearing, as well as the end of the lawsuit that Ms. Hambley currently has against certain members of the board who voted to demote her back on January 3 of this year. We have appointed a subcommittee to work through the various issues, and we are working to get a mediator involved to help us to get the best solution possible. I am pleased that I will be able to represent City of Holland District 3 residents by being named to this 5-member subcommittee. We will likely take up discussions in January or February at the latest. This Friday, we will be appointing a replacement for Kyle Terpstra. Kyle Terpstra is leaving the board, or has left the board recently after 5 years on the board. He was a commissioner in District 6, Georgetown. Sorry to see Mr. Terpstra leave, but we have narrowed it down to 5 candidates. Those 5 candidates will come before us on Friday for individual interviews that will be publicly accessible in the boardroom. I welcome input from District 3 residents on who might be the best choice to represent District 6 as Kyle's replacement. Yesterday at our board meeting, we did have a number of internal policies that were taken off the agenda, related especially to employee selection and discipline. I am not a fan of those policies. I think that there are both legal and operational issues with those policies. So I was pleased that the Planning and Policy Committee did vote to remove those agenda items, take them back to Corporate Council, and hopefully get policies that work for us, both legal-wise and operational-wise. We cannot have a county government that is being run from the administrator's chair nor from the board. It needs to have a professional human resource department helping us and offering their wisdom on our hiring and disciplinary choices. So hopefully we can get that back in January, and those policies will work to serve us well instead of placing us in positions I don't think we need to be placed in. So, final thing is, I am pleased that we're able to work with the City of Holland on our interlocal agreement to accept $1 million in funds awarded by Eagle, and to allow the City of Holland to use for their drop-in site on Pine Street. I think that will be an excellent resource not only for City of Holland residents, but for all Southwest Ottawa residents for their drop-off sustainability needs. So, as always, residents are welcome to reach out to me at dzylstra@myauto.org, or my personal number 616-443-4281. But thank you and Merry Christmas.
All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda, special order of the day, public hearings. Item 7A, City Master Plan. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So master plan is one of the very or most important items that's assigned not only to council, but certainly initially empowered with the Planning Commission to make recommendations. And Steve Peterson is ready to go here and walk you through this process. An immense amount of work by staff, but also for the Planning Commission and bringing it forward to you tonight. So, Steve, welcome. Take it away, and maybe, hopefully, you're also going to note this might be one of those last meetings of your department directors. So maybe I think there's a last slide that even notes something about him on there.
Yeah,
so,
we might have a chance to talk about that.
And Steve, before you go, Mr. Corbin has something that he would like to note.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, if you could note, Councilperson Soul has joined us at 6:23.
Great. All right. Thank you, Scott. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Keith. Glad to hear Keith describe it as one of the important documents that you guys all work on. So I will try to walk you through this. I do have a number of slides. I'll try to go quickly. I know you have a lot of other things to do, but slow me down if I'm going a little bit too fast. So maybe just a little bit of reminder, maybe how we got here. You budgeted $55,000 for this project. We awarded the bid to a consultant, McKenna and Associates, at $52,000 to do this work. And as part of that, you got the updated master plan, and then really a parallel project that came along with it, which was the Washington Square sub-area plan, which is really embedded into this document. With that, we had received $30,000 in funding from the state of Michigan through our certification process with the redevelopment ready communities. So really, the city had really been only into it for $22,000, I'll say. I will say, maybe just slightly missed being on time and on budget. We ended up spending $56,000, which was just a little bit more than that original budget, which what we got for that was really some additional work that happened as part of the Washington Square project. There's a lot of artwork in there, so I don't know if you've made it all the way through there, but we have a lot of renderings in there, so we spent a little bit more money than originally thought on there. And then the timing, we wanted to be done a little bit earlier, but just the way some of the meetings lined up, we didn't quite get done as early as we wanted to, but little reminder of how we got here. And we've been describing this as master plan refresh or master plan update. So again, maybe just to kind of describe a little bit about what we mean when we say that. The master plan was originally, or our last one was 2017. So this update was really to try to, I guess what I've described as catching up our master plan to all of the work that you did with the UDO process. So between 2017 and now, you had done all of that work with UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance, really rewriting our whole zoning code, new zoning districts, new language, rezonings were all part of that. So really to have these two documents kind of talk better to one another, we wanted to do this master plan update. So that's really what we got with this master plan update or refresh. So it isn't essentially a new plan with new recommendations. It's really trying to trying to catch us up to all of the work that you had already done. This is our timeline that we have, so you can kind of see here, starting this spring with the process where we had some community open house, community open houses with the master plan as well as Washington Square. I think we had 3 additional planning commission meetings where they were just devoted to the master plan, as well as some of these other meetings that you see on here. And then you authorized it to go out for distribution and for comments back in July. Few of the highlights that I guess I'd like to mention, in addition to some of the community input that we got through the open houses and things, we did a survey, which I thought we got a very good response, 455 responses in that. We did offer it in Spanish. I think we only had one person take it in Spanish. Esther in our office was really helpful in sort of this reach out, so you can see some of the work that we did to kind of reach out to get as much input with those as we could. Again, I thought that response rate was excellent. Some of the highlights are the updated future land use map, some updated action items. We'll go through some of these a little bit more detail in a minute. Some updated future land use descriptions, again, as a result of UDO, making sure these two things kind of talk to one another. We took the time to identify some future planning topics or study areas that we might want to get into in the future, so that's in the document as well. Included the Neighborhood Improvement Committee's blueprint as a reference document right in the master plan, as well as kind of incorporating a few of their maps and some other documentation right from their plan that's right in the master plan. We did, as we talk about historic assets in the city, we did add a chapter on historic preservation, so that wasn't in the master plan before. And if you were one of the folks that took the survey, you saw there was quite a few questions in that about historic preservation. So we really wanted to start getting some input in that, providing a kind of base level information that we could use moving forward. And then, as I mentioned, the Washington Square plan, which is included in the master plan. Took the time to meet with some of our neighboring townships, to meet with all 4 of them to kind of get their input. We met with their planning commissions just to kind of hear their topics that they wanted us to kind of consider as we started our process. So that was interesting. A couple common denominators in there. The bike pathways were certainly a common theme that we heard from the having some connections to each other. Common theme that we heard from the other communities. So a little bit of what you're looking at here, a couple things just to point out. One, the format of the master plan really stays the same. We wanted it to look the same. So for the reader to understand maybe what is new, we have this icon that you kind of see up in that upper left-hand screen, upper left-hand portion of the screen, kind of identifies something new that we put into the master plan as a result of this update. So as you can imagine, demographic information has changed. The census came out since then, so we really were able to update the demographic info, and so we're identifying that here with that symbol as well. Future land use map, what you're looking at here is the updated map highlighted with the, there's 4 different areas that had some work in between 2017 and now. So some sub-area plans that were done. Washington Square is on there, South Shore Village, Waterfront, as well as the Waverly Corridor work that was done. This is another future land use plan. This one is, it's kind of interesting. I know it's a little bit hard to read maybe at that scale, but if you look closely, you can see the heavy black outline is trying to outline some areas where you can kind of see some changes that occurred between 2017 and now. So if I point out that area over on the right-hand side of the screen in that gray color, you can see there's a heavy black line there. So that is a piece of property that wasn't in the city in 2017, and so it's in the city now, and so obviously that is a change that occurred between then and now. So that's kind of what you're looking at throughout this whole map. So again, Planning Commission spent a lot of time I don't want to say quite parcel by parcel everywhere, but we spent a lot of time going through the detail of this to kind of fine tune that map. So that's why you see some of those changes. This is one of the maps from the Neighborhood Improvement Committee, the 15-minute cities map. So again, just kind of illustrating, one, that it's new, so you see it in there with that symbol, and then two, kind of incorporating some of the work that that Neighborhood Improvement Committee has done and put it right into the master plan. So we've got a list here of a bunch of the different projects and plans that we have worked on really since, as part of that 2017 plan. You see that list, and then you see these dots where the new ones come in. And so those are listed in the document as well. Through the public hearing process at the Planning Commission, we did find out that our hyperlinks weren't working. So you can see all of those plans are underlined. Those hyperlinks are all working now. So I wanted to make sure to point that out. You've got the same thing here with some of these sub-area plans where you can see the list of all of the things that are in the current master plan, and now the additional items that are in there now as the items that are new from 2017. So again, the format of the plan, it all looks the same. So this is the chapters of all of the document, everything that's in there. The one thing that's new here, the last item, you see the historic preservation. That is the new chapter that is in here, but in a sense, the format is all the same. And then each chapter has its own goal and these action items. So you guys have seen these before. But what's new on here, again, with that little symbol, you can see the new things that are incorporated now into this update as a result of that public feedback that we received through the surveys and the open house. So then each chapter has the same idea where they all show up as the new items from this update. And then again, each chapter has this sheet where we show progress that we have made. So 2017 action item on the left-hand side, progress that's happened since 2017. And then that next column is input we received as a result of the update, the surveys, the open houses, et cetera, and then how that may have formed the new action items that you see over there on that right-hand column. So again, each of those chapters has the same sort of documentation as we move forward. Just showing you the historic preservation. Again, this is the new chapter. So it's a little bit wordier than some of the other action items. But again, this is all new information. It's going to provide a really good base moving forward, I think, to be able to evaluate and see, where to go. I have described this effort as really an educational issue where you will be able to use to kind of educate the community, the builders, and different items to be able to provide that historic preservation information. Again, talking about some of the future land use descriptions that may have changed as a result. I'm just trying to show here in that upper left-hand corner, high density residential is a new description we're using rather than apartment residential. There's different types of high density residential that don't necessarily have to be just apartments, so we thought that was a more accurate way to describe that. Over on the right-hand side, you can see the marketplace commercial is a future land use designation that we're actually removing. So we just wanted to be able for a reader to kind of follow what was changing, and so that is that district was coming out. It was replaced by what we're calling now mixed use village. The zoning plan. So this is part of the master plan. You guys will see this again as we have rezoning applications brought before you. So I think this is going to be a very valuable tool, and two, it's very helpful now that these two documents are kind of talking to one another a little bit better, so that the new future land use categories line up with potential zoning districts. And so what you're seeing here is kind of the menu of what somebody might be asking for, and some tools that we will be able to use and that you'll be able to use to evaluate the appropriate zoning district as these move forward. Many of those future land use categories have multiple zoning districts they would essentially be eligible for, so they don't line up one-to-one, so to speak. So this, again, will be a very helpful tool as the Planning Commission and the City Council looks at rezonings moving forward. Some of the, we took some time to identify some items that we wanted to call out to make sure that we're going to be evaluating moving forward. Again, with all of the work that you did with Udo, there's some items on there we want to be able to measure, did certain things happen, why not? So we kind of wanted to call it out to ourselves to make sure that as the years go forward, we're evaluating some of these things. One of the items to note here, I think the Planning Commission spent a little bit of time talking about in the industrial district. Udo now does allow for residential uses in certain spots that are appropriate. So again, calling it out to ourselves to making sure to evaluate those things in the years to come. As I mentioned before, we identified some future planning projects or topics. So there's sub-area plans, there's corridors, specific topic plans. So it's kind of, again, a whole menu here of items that came out of this process that we thought would be important to continue to look at that may involve some future study. These will be some items that the Planning Commission, along with that whole list of action items from each of those other chapters, that the Planning Commission will identify as their work plan on an annual basis of what items that they might want to look into. And again, some of these, like the master plan, would be things that they might be asking for some budget for, so that would be something that you guys might see again as well. I wanted to point out this page, the area on the left-hand side called adding land to the city. One of the things that we thought would be important in the master plan is to provide a mechanism if there is some land that comes into the city through a 425 agreement. The Unified Development Ordinance identifies it as through annexation. And so the Unified Development Ordinance does a really good job of saying if land does come into the city, what the zoning will be. We didn't have anything in the master plan, so rather than have something come into the city and not have a future land use designation and have to go through a master plan amendment process, we at least wanted to have something in the master plan that if some property does come into the city, that it would have some future land use designation. Again, doesn't mean that it couldn't be changed, but at least a little bit like like our zoning, like the Udo does, it'll at least come in and be identified as something. And so this is these are the three locations where we've had the most recent 425 agreement where the properties have come into the city. So simply pointing those out on this map, that those would have been able to come in with a future land use designation. Identifying here the airport layout plan. So we did add some language. So this should have a little identifier tool as new. But I wanted to just point this out. As you guys approved the distribution of the plan for public comment, one of the comments we got was in regards to the airport layout plan that we needed to have some language in there that was really consistent with the state law about how our plan interacts with the airport layout plan. So this is an attempt to really address that. And really, in short, I think what it's saying is that the plan that we have put together recognizes the airport layout plan. Their plan doesn't trump our plan, but our plan recognizes the airport layout plan, and so the decisions that we've made are based on our understanding of what their airport layout plan is. And that's really some language that's required in the plan from state law. So that is new in the plan. Washington Square. So I just have a few slides here. So again, there's a lot in there for Washington Square. Cut right to sort of the good stuff at the end with some of the nice drawings. But this is the concept plan that came out of that whole process. Again, a visioning plan of what might be possible in this area. So really what you're looking at is based on the current zoning, the new Unified Development Ordinance language, what might be possible down there. So you can kind of see what that might look like. I probably want to point out, at least probably the big conversation through that process was about being able to use some of that sidewalk area, being able to maybe have, dining out there, things like that. So there was a lot of conversation about that. And maybe the big takeaway here was that the use of the alleys to be able to do some of that stuff. So on the east side, maybe those alleys being closed off permanently, and maybe on the west side, that's a more seasonal thing. Again, the Washington Square Vision Plan is just that. It's a vision for what might be able to happen. The Business Improvement District Board is already kind of working on some ideas based on a lot of this work. Just some other comments and issues and opportunities that were identified. Again, kind of talking about Washington as it goes through there. One of the ideas that was kicked around early was the idea of one-waying that street to maybe narrow the road and provide some more sidewalk for some of that dining. Did take a look at that. Very minimal gain of about 1 foot. So that idea was dismissed. But I guess I just wanted to point that out, as that was kind of a bit of the process that took place when they were going through public comment period. Some other items in there about providing public transit a little closer to the square. And then again, some of the nice drawings, kind of see a rendering here looking northeast from 19th Street of what might be possible. And then kind of turning around, looking southwest. Again, you kind of see the idea of using that alley with some seating out there, and then even a raised crosswalk across the street. So what we are asking for, what the Planning Commission has recommended, is that you adopt this resolution to approve our updated, our refreshed master plan, and did want to draw special attention to Mark Vanderploeg and all of his work and his service as he gets ready to retire. So we gave him a special spot on the acknowledgement page.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Questions from council members for staff? Ms. Soul?
Thanks, Steve. I just had a question about the airport when you said explained and identified as something when we get land, because that just, so I think on one of the maps you identified the dark gray line. Was that one of the properties that you were talking about explaining if we got some land in the future use, how you would recognize that or something? What does that mean?
So
how do we get land and?
Yeah, so what I guess I was trying to identify on this map were the 3 properties that have most recently come into the city as a result of that 425 agreement with Fillmore Township. So those properties came into the city as part of that agreement, but our master plan doesn't recognize what they might be, what we would put them in as a master plan designation. Our zoning ordinance does a really good job of saying if some of those properties come in like these did, what their zoning will be. So we simply wanted to have some similar language so that our master plan would also recognize those properties when they came into the city. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Other questions from council? Mr. Corbin?
Just going back to that future land annexation portion, the question she's posed. So if we were to do that, a 425 agreement would be entered in with Fillmore Township, and when we would probably have some time or deliberation by council of what that land would be used for and why we would be annexing that land, correct?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, we even exchanged some looks. Annexation is still kind of a term of art, but in all practical purposes in state law now, annexation almost just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Now it's called PA, Public Act 425, which is a cooperative transfer of land from one community into another. And yes, in order to accomplish a 425, you actually have to have an agreement that's executed very publicly by both entities, and then there's a referendum period that follows that also. And yes, we're familiar with that. In fact, some of the conversations that we had tonight, I'll just say, of Old Wing Mission are interesting, because that property where Old Wing Mission is has been in Fillmore Township for ever, until actually just last year was the first time that it came into the city of Holland. So that's an example, right, of property that was transferred into, in this case, the city from Fillmore Township, but that doesn't just happen. That's agreement between those two entities, and then there's a referendum period even with that.
Any other questions for staff? Great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. This does require a public hearing. So if there's any member of the public who would like to address council in regard to this particular item, this is your opportunity to do so. The same requirements as the general public comment period. Each person has the opportunity to speak one time only on this issue and limited to 5 minutes. And again, it is one-way communication. Is there anyone here who would like to address council? Please come forward, sir. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record again?
My name is Rick Bosch, and I live in the city of Holland. A little while ago, I talked about my winter volunteer job. I'd like to just mention a little bit about my summer volunteer jobs. I'm very involved with Ottawa County Parks, working on restoration and restoring some of the land. I'm very involved in the Macatawa Greenway Trail. I'm very involved in Project Clarity. I actually have a PhD in chemistry, and I did phosphate chemistry for 20 years, so trying to get the phosphate out of the environment, it's something that I can offer some pretty good advice about. I'm also on the advisory board for the ODC. So this is a document that I actually did read, and I actually enjoyed reading it, just looking at some of the environmental aspects of it, plus the historical aspects of it. I really thought it was well done. And this is something I do want to commend the city for doing these things. I think it's really worthwhile. I know there's not probably a lot of people like me that go out and read these things, but if you do, it had great information and something that as I go forward on these various projects, it really is going to help me do a better job. So thank you very much for doing it.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council in regard to the master plan? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the city master plan?
Move to approve.
Moved by Byrd. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Soul. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Raymond.
Yeah, I just want to thank Steve and the planning department and the planning commission for all of the work that you all did on this particular project. It really is such a well-done document. I appreciate the words from our citizen who really, I think, spoke eloquently to it. I was just looking through it again, and because of course I've read it a million times, but it's always great to see how involved people are in the community. At 2017 master plan, there were 50 meetings and 1,100 people were involved in that 2017 process, and we had more than half of that amount participating in this refresh, and I just think it's a really terrific way of moving forward. I also like that we use it in the city. It isn't something, when I took a planning course when I first was on the planning commission from Michigan State University, they talked about how so many of these master plans just kind of sit on a shelf and gather dust, but ours really doesn't. So I appreciate all that work and the work going forward. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from council? I'm just going to echo Councilmember Raymond's comments as well. Thank you to the planning staff, and thank you to the members of the Planning Commission. This was a long process, a deliberative process one that we did not take lightly, and especially an exclamation point on the fact that this is not a document that sits on a shelf and gathers dust. I know Planning Commission uses it on a regular basis. It is a great guideline for what we hope that the city is going to be in the future. It is not set in stone. It is a guideline, and it is exactly that, but it gives us a way forward to make sure that we're doing things the way that we would like them to be done in a very thoughtful manner. With that, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Freeman.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Sol.
Yes.
Rowan.
Yes.
Shay.
Yes.
Schulteis.
Yes.
Bird.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item, item 7B, Industrial Facilities Tax Abatement for LG Energy Solution, Michigan Incorporated. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, public. Couple things. I'm going to introduce this tonight, but probably, Council, you'll note a difference tonight in that I am transferring this to a new staff member, not just tonight, but moving forward also. So we just noted that Mark Vanderplug is on the like shot day clock right now. He's counting down the number of days, and we're very sorry to see him go. But we've also, as you all know, have been very blessed to be able to recruit a excellent replacement, Mark Myers. And we have changed some of the functions up there a little bit, where historically economic development really has fell kind of across different people in the city, depending on the topic, and quite often me. But we've changed that, and Mark Myers, who is our new CNS director, does have the day-to-day responsibilities for economic development now. So I will say probably I'm more excited than anyone that he's here. But that also means that typically when we have these abatements that come before you, I always, give a little talk and talk about different things. And this is the last time I'm going to be doing that, because Mark is going to be doing this moving forward. I will just say this. One, the project that we have before us is with LG Energy Solutions. I'm talking a little bit now. Mark will go into and talk a little bit more about the larger context of many things that are happening with LG, but really zero us in on specifically the item and the property that's in front of you tonight. As you know, in your packet, it is a $16.5 million investment, and it's a 52,000 and change square foot addition to what's called Phase 1 or Plant 1, the original site fronting on 48th Street. What you have in the packet, but also just a snapshot on the PowerPoint in front of you, is that we have recently kind of updated again just a 2-pager quick fact sheet on these. I'll just remind everybody that when we do these abatements, partly so I can deliver one of the phrases that you hear me say all the time, is that one of the things we outline on these quick fact sheets is I think a lot of times people hear, a $16.5 million investment, and they may think that that's a $16.5 million tax forgiveness or the value of that, and that's actually not accurate. In fact, historically, all of us in our homes, right, we pay for the value of the property, and there might be personal property, and we don't pay for taxes like on our couch or our refrigerator or all those types of things. And historically, these 198s cover some of the value of the equipment in the building also. Not always, it also covers real investment. But the value of these abatements is that it's a $16.5 million investment, and they're going to be, it's the taxes that's paid on that $16.5 million. And one of the things that we've been showing is we show not only the value of the abatement, but also the value not only to the city, but all the other taxing entities for the value of that abatement over time. And this is specifically the one for the item in front of you tonight, but for council members, we prepare this for every single one of these abatements that come in front of you. And I always use the phrase that these are statewide abatements that the vast majority, in fact, I'm not really right now familiar of any communities that don't grant these 198 abatements. Certainly ask questions and poke and prod that, but part of the challenge always is participating in this program, and do you want 100% of nothing, or do you want 50% of something? And it really signifies what we've always tried to do is find a partnership with our industrial business communities to bring value into the community and also provide value back to them. So with that, and really kind of doing that introduction almost for the last time, Mark, come on up. And I think the clicker's there to highlight a few more things, and you don't have to use the 100% of, but you're a former manager, we all use that phrase to some extent, right?
Keith did such a great job of teeing this up, I'm ready to just take questions, so. But seriously, folks, thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'm pleased to present on LG's 198 tax abatement. Keith has asked me to provide kind of a broader, high-level overview of LG. They have a number of projects going on simultaneously. So we're going to talk about Phase 3, which has been publicly announced. You've heard about it, but you haven't seen anything formal, and I'll explain that. We'll talk a little bit about Phase 2, which is under construction, and then we'll drill down to Phase 1, where we're talking about the tax abatement tonight. All right. So Phase 3, it's been announced publicly. The MEDC has provided a performance grant, which does anticipate a local tax abatement. That's to come in the future. One reason you haven't seen anything on this is we as staff have not had anything in writing from the company, but we are engaged with them to talk about the approval process. There are a number of approvals that will be necessary. So no local agreements to date. There is no REN zone involved in Phase 3. No net new jobs, however, there will be $2.5 billion in new investment of a 1.7 million square foot addition. So stay tuned, you'll hear more about Phase 3 as it moves forward formally. Phase 2, if I can get the clicker right. Phase 2 is under construction. It also includes an MEDC grant, a 20-year REN zone, and in 2022, the city did approve a tax abatement, but only on debt millage. The estimate is 1,200 new jobs, and the investment is $7.1 billion with 1.3 million square feet. And our staff at the NSC department is very busy under construction with inspections and so forth. And then Phase 1, which is the subject of tonight's tax abatement, originally built in 2010 with $3 million in investment, a 450 square foot facility at the time. Had a federal grant as well as an MEDC performance grant. It had a 15-year REN zone, which is coming off in 2025. There was an IFT in 2017 approved by the city that involved adding 250 new jobs. That was a $19 million investment of 50,000 square feet. And then tonight, before you have another abatement request. As the city manager said, $16.5 million in investment, 53,000 square foot addition to the packaging plant for Phase 1. We'll talk about the jobs. The tax abatement application says it's retaining 155 jobs. Since receiving the application, we got news publicly that the company was laying off 170 employees. So clearly we're going to sort that out tonight, and we do have company officials here that will also address that. But what's important to note is to date, 550 jobs have been promised. We met recently this week with company officials to see where they're at with employment. Currently, they employ 1,030, and that takes into account the 170 announced layoffs. So they've clearly outperformed their promises with their past tax incentives. So with that, we'll answer any questions. And if the mayor so chooses, we can have company officials address the city council.
Let's see if we've got questions for you first, Mark,
Sure.
and then I think the council likely will want to talk to company officials as well.
Very good.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Vreeman?
I'd just like you to repeat those employment numbers that you just rattled off like a minute ago.
So the original plant estimated 300 jobs. The expansion in 2017 was an additional 250, so 550. Current employment stands at 1,030, and that's after considering the approximately 170 layoffs.
Other questions for staff? I've got a couple for you.
Sure.
In phase 2, there's a requirement for a number of jobs as well. I don't have that number right in front of me. I didn't write it down.
1,200.
1,200.
Yes.
We're not counting those 1,200 yet because phase 2's not been completed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So they're currently at just under double the amount that was required under the original phase 1 agreement and the supplement, the additional 250 that's
correct.
there. Do you know, are the 155 additional jobs supposed to be on top of the 1,030 that there are now, or how do those get counted into this calculation for phase 1?
Based on the application, it's retaining 155, so those would be part of the 1,030.
Okay, so what they're saying is they won't lay off another 155 if we go ahead with this.
That is staff's understanding.
Okay, okay. Other questions from staff members, or council members for
Yeah,
staff? Yes,
just
Ms. Raymond?
Yeah, just another clarification. I think, did I also understand that LG asked for an extension of meeting that 1,200 goal target?
Well, that's based on the state
Okay.
MEDC's requirements.
Got it.
So in the future, you may see phases 2 and 3 being labeled differently, but currently this is what is formalized on the local level.
Yeah, and one other piece, and this is really more for the public than anyone else. There's been talk about phase 3. There have been discussions at the state level and agreements at the state level. There have been discussions between staff and LG Energy, but there's currently nothing before this city council in regard to phase 3 because we haven't been presented with anything formal, correct?
Correct.
All
We
right.
have not seen any formal site plans. We haven't had formal applications for BPW for service requirements for electricity. But again, we are engaged and talking to them on a regular basis about what's required in the future and what the timeline will look like.
Okay, and number of public comments earlier in the evening in regard to the Old Wing mission, that would be something that would likely be impacted by a phase 3 that we haven't seen anything formal on yet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Sorry. Just to unpack the 15-year rent zone that will be expiring in 2 years, if I understand that right. Will that get renewed or no?
No.
Okay.
No, once they sunset, they're over. And at that point, if the real property is expanded, they can apply for additional. And I will add that Plant 1 is being renovated completely. The interior, they're going to new lines based on new technology, new production lines. And any real property improvements that they make within the building also would be eligible for local tax payments.
Other questions for staff? Great. Thanks, Mark. But I think we would like
Thank you,
to
Mayor.
hear from the applicant as well.
Very well. Who's up? Lisa?
And the formality, would you please state your names and municipality for the record? And just one thing, when there are multiple people at the microphone, please make sure you speak into the microphone because we're broadcasting as well, and we want to make sure people at home can hear you. Great. And welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Lisa Niscaroni. I am a resident of the city of Grosse Pointe, Michigan.
Hi, good evening. My name is Roger Trabele, and I'm a resident of the city of Rockford, Michigan.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit more about this project, as well as our appreciation to the community. And I believe that we have a few slides to share.
So advance the arrow and it should. There you go.
Perfect. So this is a bit of this is a very basic overview that staff has already shared. But again, these are the types of investments in manufacturing facilities that the IFT program was intended to encourage. And so we're here and we're grateful to again be making additional investments in the community. And so if you can, there we go. So this is a very brief, rough snapshot of what is ahead, and to assist us in really focusing the attention on the question at hand this evening, which is outlined in red. And so this is, although it's in the footprint of the initial plant space, it really is a complement and an enabler to the expansion that is taking place in the second phase. And so I want to put that into context, and I think as we move to the next slide, I would ask Roger to share a bit more about how this incorporates into really the long-term growth of the facility.
Hi, so Module 1 is that small building to the west side of the complex. It's an existing building of around 100,000 square feet. We are adding 52,000 square feet to that building to accommodate 3 new assembly lines, which are larger capacity, they're longer. And those are being added. So this building started recently. We started construction sometime around July, August, and as you can see, the shell of the building is already up. So it's moving quickly, and we will start to move on the inside with a number of additional works that will happen in 2024. It takes a while to get these production lines tested and verified before we go into mass production. So we're on a timeline. This project is happening according to our planned production schedule.
Thanks, Roger. So as you can see on the next slide, and this is something that, you hear all these headlines, you talk about battery manufacturing and the growth of the EV industry. So when you're looking at increasing battery production, you're looking at exponential capacity growth, not incremental. And so that's why we felt it was important to share that, right, despite the headlines, if you will, and a lot of the news today, that the long-term future, both of the industry, of the company, and we believe of the community, is very positive and is bright. But this is just to say, right, we are a tier 1 supplier for the automotive industry, which is an inherently volatile industry, but we're on the front lines of this transition. And frankly, we have been, as you well know, since 2010. And so there are fluctuations, there are risks, but we have been a market leader and plan to continue to be one, and appreciate the continued partnership from the city toward that success. And this is something that, right, we're talking now investment, not just our company, but in the broader industry, in the billions, which was something that were really outlier sort of projects in the past. And now people are asking how many billions, which is, again, a question that I never really thought I'd be talking about. So just wanted to talk about the scale and the future, because when we come in and talk about these incremental steps, it's difficult to see what the ends and the trends are. So I think we have one more slide, and this is just really, again, to highlight our involvement as a member of the community in the past and currently. And when we look at the growth of our company that we've shared a bit about now, through investments, through employment, we would expect the growth of our engagement with the community to follow suit, and to grow in that way. So, wanted to we wanted to cover the question at hand, but also give a little context around it, so that the council members felt that they understood how this fits in with the big picture. Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Questions from council members for the applicant? Yes, Ms. Raymond.
A little while ago, several of us were at an event, and there was a person who expressed concern about the challenges she faced in finding internships for young people in the community, mostly college students in the various universities and colleges around here. So I was just wondering, we often talk about jobs, but I was just wondering, I don't really know the process that businesses and companies go through to engage interns, and so I wondered about that and what your process is, and if you have interns in your company.
So I can speak again at a high level, but generally speaking, I am aware that that LG Energy Solution does hire interns. I'm not aware of the extent. I believe that there have been interns at the Holland facility in particular, but you're right. Internships and then on-ramps to long-term careers, whether you have a college degree or not, are really at the core of this industry and the growth that we're seeing. And so we're working with the State of Michigan Talent Action Team to come up with curriculum that is scalable and that can be deployed at the local level in order to prepare the future workforce, to upskill and reskill the existing workforce, to ensure, again, that there's a long-term career pathway and not just like a job that what you see is what you get. So as these investments in the technology gets more complex, the skill sets and the opportunities for individuals becomes more complex and promising. And so we want to partner along that entire journey.
Yeah, so forgive me for my ignorance here, but so this might be getting a little gritty, but so you've got cells that get made and then put into modules, correct? And then that makes a battery, right? And I think in some reading, I saw that this is maybe the packaging, kind of that process is what's going on in this section of the building. So we see no job increases, but do we see, is this a vertical integration question, or are you going to actually make more product? If that makes sense.
Do you want to?
Hi, so you understand the process very well. We do make cells, and it looks like a pouch, like what's inside your phone, but that's a little bit bigger. And then those individual cells, they go into a box. We call that a module, hence why we call this section Module 1. Then sometimes those modules go into an even larger box. We call it a pack. And it all depends on what the customer wants. So it is vertical integration going upwards. Okay. So you get more value for your product. We have that operation on now. This is just a really large investment in the capacity of that vertical integration for one of our existing customers who has increased orders. So that is what we're doing.
So the output of the amount of, let's say, cells or modules will be going up, but not necessarily in relation to this. I mean, it could have gone somewhere else, right? But now you're keeping it in house.
Yes, there's some manufacturers. Some manufacturers have their own module assembly operations. They consider that proprietary, or for whatever reason they have that capacity in house. But then some customers, so those customers, the former, would buy cells alone. And then we have some customers that say, can you do it for us? Right. So that's what it is.
I just asked because then we're talking about increased materials for plastic for the packs. We're not talking about a lot more batteries necessarily coming out because of this addition, right? Does that make sense?
Well, we when everything comes together on the complex, when phase 2, as we start to get that into mass production, part of and one day we'll certainly invite you so you can relate to what these steps are. Part of that manufacturing process will feed into this module 1. So we're going to benefit from that increased capacity. So our plant now is just a 5 gigawatt plant. Now a 5 gigawatt plant fits in a 700,000 square foot building. We were the first gigawatt factory in the United States. Since then, there have been a lot more plants being built. We are involved in many joint ventures and some direct investments ourselves. As you can see in our phases, we are moving up to 45 gigawatt hours. This all comes together as that extra. So you realize now that this industry is moving towards mass production. The technology is being updated and refined and accepted. And as you get to mass production, we expect technology to improve, battery range to improve, prices to come down, all of those things. So I guess to answer your question, this module 1 is part of our module operations. We will have a module 2 as well, but this one will take product from plant 2 and plant 1 and come together in our, this is like a true assembly operation. What we call assembly internally is our cell assembly, but this is really the battery that goes into your car. This is that assembly. Sorry to bore you with the details,
No,
but
that's great.
Sometimes in meetings, your staff says, okay, enough about the details, we can come out of that, okay?
I would like to know, on average, how many times do you charge the batteries in-house?
That's, the battery process takes about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And it's like making bread. You know, you start to put together this package, and you have to then start, for want of a better term, exercising that package, a process we call charge and discharge. But sort of like if you have a magnet and you have a north and a south, you want those things to kind of go in and out. That makes the battery more effective, more efficient. And that could happen thousands of times until we are satisfied that we get the efficiency of charging and discharging and the state of charge. And we do a number of tests to ensure that's what we want. So it's not just a few times, it's a lot, and it takes a long time. And the city staff knows that the power requirements for a plant like this is quite significant. So a lot of what we are in discussions about is how do we get power of that scale to the plant.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Freeman.
I'm questioning how long the anticipated update of the current building would take.
The current building, meaning, because we talk like in phases sometimes we use names of fish and so on, it gets confusing. But so we have the existing building that's being updated, but it's a very complex project because we are updating while we're operating. We call it a brownfield project, and it's drives you nuts. The phase 2 is a full greenfield project that is under construction, and we expect to be into mass production in 2025. Having said that, we actually turn on the plant in sections and start doing testing, because the testing process, apart from testing and validation of what we do in the plant, that has to get to the customer. And the customer has to say, listen, I tested it in my product and I'm satisfied with it. So those iterations take a while before we can say run. So in terms of timeline, everything is lining up for 2025, but production continues in 2024. We don't stop. We continue to make batteries. We just know that, that step change in this slide, let me go back, this one here, that step change that shows the lower level jumping up in the middle, that's 2025.
I think my question is, thank you, I think it's more on the, reflected of the current layoffs that just took place and the retooling of the current facility, is my understanding, the reason why that took place. Is there anticipation of that would get done sooner than 25, that there'd be employment back into the business?
So as Roger mentioned, as the lines are installed and are brought up to capacity and operation, there will be incremental hiring and employment required along that process. The most significant being at the point of mass production in 2025, but there's certainly some step ups in employment as we bring those online.
Thank you for that. I think it's good to give perspective for us and for the community of when they hear layoffs to know, what's expected and what's not. The other piece I would just add is just thank you for being a community partner and investing in the community. I have friends that work there, dear friends, and you've promoted and seen their hard work and moved them along in the company of helping them and allowing their success. So thank you for being a community partner as well.
Other questions from council members? Ms. Soul?
Thank you for what you guys do in the community. For me, it's just a little, so we had phase 1 and now we're phase 2, but we're still working back on phase 1 to update. And along with my colleague mentioning the layoffs, so they will be called back eventually, because I think I had some constituents, what was, the agreement and how can they backtrack, and I don't know all of the ins and outs, but, so those 170 will be called back eventually when you guys are back at capacity or the phases are about completed.
So the job commitments that were highlighted as part of phase 2 that are with the state of Michigan are performance-based above a baseline level of employment that we have. And so we must be at a baseline level of employment in order to avail ourselves of any of the state of Michigan incentives. But for this period, as we noted, really end of 2024, beginning of 2025 is when it becomes like operational with the bulk of the employment needs. And so there, as we stated, there are numerous opportunities for those affected, most recently, to reapply for positions. It is just the fact that it's going to be nearly a year before opportunities sort of reopen and we're able to ramp up. And that does not feel like a reasonable request of individuals who are skilled and talented, and there are demands in the community for those folks to sit and wait until we issue openings.
Thank you. And then can you tell me a little bit about your employees? Are they mostly local, Ottawa County, or do they come in from the surrounding communities? Do you have a...
While I don't have that now, that is absolutely something that we can provide. Generally, right, we have, keeping in mind confidentiality of our employees, but we can sort of provide some order of magnitude on the employee population. But what I will say is, as part of not only the Module 1 expansion, but also of Phase 2, the employment in the construction trades is significant, I believe, around 1,200, including out-of-state talent. We've sourced as much as we could locally, but we're actually bringing in some of those construction jobs that we expect to be here over the course of the next 12 to 18 months as part of this expansion.
Thanks. And the reason I ask that is because, bringing new jobs, it affects, housing. Yes. And we all understand that housing is a big issue across the country. And so I seen your slide of community involvement. I think if you want to go back, it included Habitat for Humanity. But I just wondered if you also partner with, some of the apartment complexes or the different ones to create, and we have a couple different names, I don't know them off the top of my head, but to help be a part of the solution for housing. That would be a great avenue. And then along with what my colleague Lynn said about, internships or, creating partnerships collaboratively with these organizations or other organizations within the community. So I appreciate what you guys do. I know along the phases there's been pros and cons of, we love our community, and there's always, the pros and cons of, well, we want it to stay the same, but we can't stay the same because we don't grow, and we want to be an inclusive community. And that affects everything, the economic drive, places to live, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a domino effect. And so right now, housing is an important issue. And so definitely we have to be intentional with the phases 1 and 2 growing, and bringing those housing opportunities as well. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from council members for the applicant? Oh, yeah, Mr. Byrd.
I guess I want to get some clarification first, so this will probably go to you, Keith. So we have phase 1, phase 2, correct? And this is a addition to phase 1 building. So phase 1 comes out of tax abatement 2 years. And this is not resetting that. This is only for that portion that's being added on to, correct?
Yeah, so it gets a little complicated, so stick with us, and Mark maybe even help me, but the rent zone, right, instead of, like most of these others, it's like when they go and then they end, and it's just, the rent zone transitions off over a period of years. So the rent zone for the area, and a little bit different, a rent zone is for an area, not necessarily specifically for a building. That area is transitioning off of that initial rent zone. But this is an abatement on a specific building. And the interesting thing is this abatement actually won't kick in and cover anything for 2024 calendar year. It actually, even though you're taking action on it now, you're required to take action on it because of within a certain period of when they start construction, file an application, and you need to take action. It actually won't come on and have value in taxes, if you would, fully until 2025.
Upon completion of construction.
So you've got some different things moving on there. So that's why we have really talented staff in the assessing department and the treasurer's office that figures out the details of how that tax assessment works. But good question. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
It does. Now, I guess then my next question is, so, because we've been told all along that it's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, right? Now, we bring this into the equation. I guess for me, I would like to know, are there any other opportunities that you guys are looking for to do this exact same thing?
Exact same thing
As in adding the rent zone, not the rent zone, but what's it called again?
Yeah, so a couple things maybe. Rent zones, remember, we know that there is a rent zone, it's an area that exists for phase 1, but that is transitioning off, and that will not be renewed.
Correct.
So there's a difference between a rent zone and a tax abatement. Okay?
Yep.
Phase 2 hasn't been completed yet, but that is a new rent zone for an area in which buildings are being built within that rent zone. And then there's been talk about phase 3, but two important things as it relates to that. That's has a state grant associated with it, but that does not include a rent zone. And the city, while we've had conversations, they haven't submitted anything, whether that be a planning site plan or all of the detailed documents with our friend Dave Koster for service requirements. So there is a whole host of things that still need to be submitted by the company that we can't even, although we know, like, we don't know what we don't know until it's submitted.
Projections, understood. So
does that help?
a little bit.
And beyond that, I
this
don't
right
know,
here,
but
this
LG can answer that.
This right here, what we're doing is called a tax abatement then, right? For
So
new
this
bill.
is a PA 198 tax abatement. And Quincy
191.
198.
198.
And again, that stands for, it's a public act.
Okay.
198, and all those PAs, whatever the numbers are, they're state laws that authorize us and other municipalities to offer these types of programs.
Okay.
The 198, Quincy, is the ones that you've dealt with probably several hundred of these while you've been on council, right? These are.
I have not been on that long.
Well, they come along quite a few. Sorry about that. You look so young. But the 198s are more standard, right? The rent zones, the only two that I'm ever familiar with in the city history is phase one, which is phasing off. Phase one, which is coming off the rolls, and then phase two, which really hasn't taken effect yet because it's not open, it's not completed yet.
Right. Got it. So I guess as we've talked a lot, the historical from phase one to potentially phase three, right? During that time, that's all we've heard is phase one, phase two, and phase three. We have not heard about a PA 198 tax abatement. And I'm sure that was in you guys' plans. That's not just something you just automatically, hey, let's just do this, right? That takes planning. And I guess my question is, looking forward, are there opportunities or plans to do PA 198s in addition to the one that's current and phases 1, 2, and 3?
So by its nature, these tax abatements do require actually quite a bit of detail and would have to be coordinated at an appropriate time. And so that is, again, why, to your point, you might not have been aware during a conversation regarding phase two that this would be coming. And so, but the program itself is also intended to encourage, again, the retooling and the upgrading in terms of like technology and so forth of personal property. And so with the pace of how things are going in the battery manufacturing industry, I sure hope that we'll be back saying that we are adding more lines or investing more. But that is because of the nature of the program. This is the one that we have the appropriate amount of detail to bring forward.
Okay, and that's what I was looking for. So there is an opportunity or possibility that you guys would be in front of us again for a P198 tax abatement.
I think we both hope so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions from council members? I have a few, and I'm gonna apologize in advance. You probably don't know I'm an attorney by trade, and my whole world is technicalities and details, which is why I asked the staff the questions that I did initially. And I think it's really important for the public to understand there's a very specific question that is being asked of council today. And it's important to put that question into context of what Quincy was talking about and what the other council members were talking about. Under phase one, there was a requirement for 550 jobs. You guys got that all the way up to 1,200 jobs, but it was reduced recently down to 1,030. But it's 1,030. You met 1,030 jobs with a requirement of 550. There is a requirement for jobs under the Renaissance Zone for phase two, but there is no requirement that any of those jobs be filled yet at this point because phase two is not completed. So when we look at phase one and phase two, you are in compliance with both of the agreements that you had with this city council in regard to phase one and phase two. Phase three, we have not seen yet. And whatever comes of that and whether it's a Renaissance Zone or a PA 198 or what might come in the future, we don't know, and that's not the question before us today. The question before us today is whether or not we approve a PA 198 for this particular addition to the phase one plant, and what you're saying is that'll allow you to retain 155 jobs of the 1,030 that you have in place right now. So details matter. I just want to make sure that the public understands that right now, LG Energy Solution Michigan Incorporated is in compliance with the job requirements for all of the Renaissance zones that they have done with the City of Holland so far. That's not a question, that's just a comment based on what I was told by staff. If you want to nod, that's great. Now, technicalities are important, details are important, understanding the question that's in front of us is important, but context matters as well. This city council, as the city manager said to Mr. Byrd, he has likely sat through thousands of these. Is that what he said, thousands, Quincy, over the course of your career?
He did lie about that.
Thousands of these discussions, and I don't think in my 4 years as mayor we've ever denied a PA 198 request because we think it's logical to take one half of something rather than 100% of nothing, to paraphrase our city manager. But context matters. Not only am I an attorney, I am also an elected representative of the people of the City of Holland. And the people of the City of Holland aren't necessarily going to take the time or the energy to understand the details that I just went through with you on this. What they see in the headlines in the paper are 170 jobs lost right before the holidays. You sat here through the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, as we all did, and heard numerous people step up very concerned about the Old Wing mission on a piece of property that was just purchased by LG Energy Solutions for a potential phase 3. And a question was asked of this council during that public comment period, is this the appropriate time to talk about that? And I kind of went out of what my normal routine is and said, there is nothing in front of this council at this moment that talks about the Old Wing mission. But I'm going to tell you, I have been receiving emails and phone calls and had somebody stop me at the gym this week and interrupted my workout session, which I don't like to have happen, and asked me specifically about the Old Wing mission. So I'm going to ask you, we like to be good partners. We like to consider ourselves partners and a very friendly city council toward business. And we see ourselves as partners with the businesses in this community because we know that the businesses in this community are the lifeblood of this community. We cannot be successful without you, and you cannot be successful without us. And I love the slide that's in front of us right now and the types of things that you've done in the community. But you've heard tonight how concerned members are of this community. And I'll tell you, for every person that comes to that microphone, there's probably 100 people behind them. So I'm going to ask you the question, does LG Energy Solution have any plans or ideas or thoughts about the Old Wing mission on that property that you've just purchased?
And I do understand that there were a lot of questions and that hopefully a bit of a response came out last week, which is currently where we are, which we are looking at our options to preserve the property in furtherance of preserving the property, the building. So there are zero plans to raise it or demolish or, again, destroy any portion of that.
I'm just going to impress upon you and about the other representatives of the company to take heed to what was said here tonight, because while it's a very specific question that this council is being asked tonight, and in regard to this PA 198 that does not involve the Old Wing mission, there will likely be questions coming before this council if what we're hearing about phase 3 is the case, where this council is going to be looking very closely about how our corporate partners, the people that the companies that we really value in this community, how they value the community that they're in as well. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other council questions or comments? All right. We do need to have a public hearing on this, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. I will now open it to a public hearing. This is an opportunity for the public to be able to speak on this issue. Same rules apply as in the previous public hearing. Only on this particular issue, 5 minutes. You have one opportunity to speak. There are the three lights in front of you, the green, the yellow, and the red. Green's good, yellow's 1 minute, red you're done. And please state your name and municipality for the record.
My name is Judy Parr, and I'm a resident of Holland. And I want to piggyback on some of the comments that Nathan Box, our mayor, made. Most of my information comes from the Holland Sentinel. LG is currently working on a $1.7 billion expansion that started in early 2022. That development was meant to create 1,000 skilled, well-paying jobs by 2025. A deadline to meet that target from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation in exchange for two $10 million grants was already pushed back by 1 year in June this year. In October, we learned that LG Energy Solution announced a partnership with Toyota that will bring an additional $3 billion investment to the Holland area. According to a Holland Sentinel article, quote, in terms of tax assistance, LG is proposing an industrial facilities tax exemption, PA 198, which provides significant tax incentives to manufacturing and high technology companies for the purpose of creating new jobs or maintaining existing jobs, end quote. If approved, this tax exemption would decrease the company's tax liability for 12 years. And according to the quick facts information in this meeting's packet, the total amount in lost tax revenue at the current millage rate for the City of Holland and nearby other entities would be well over $2,800,000 of lost tax revenue over 12 years. In contrast to the 1,000 skilled, well-paying jobs by 2025 that LG promised, we learned in mid-November from the Holland Evening Sentinel that, quote, approximately 170 LG production team members will be laid off in coming months. LG officials say the additional expansion related to the partnership with Toyota, if approved, will mean another building for LG, but not more open positions, thanks to smart factory technology, end quote. LG officials said, however, that it would retain 155 full-time employees related to the project slated for completion in 2025. Given that LG is reneging on its promise to create 1,000 skilled, well-paying jobs by 2025, I recommend that the City Council not approve additional tax breaks for LG Energy Solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council in regard to this particular item? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the industrial facilities tax abatement for LG Energy Solution Michigan Incorporated?
Motion approved item 14A as presented.
Moved by Corbin. Is there support?
Oh,
Support.
excuse me.
Yes.
Correction. I got the wrong number.
Nope, it's 7B.
Item 7B as presented.
Moved by Corbin. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Schulteis. Any discussion by council members? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Raymond,
Yes.
Corbin,
Yes.
Soul,
Yes.
Rowan,
Yes.
Shay,
Yes.
Schulteis,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda, item number 9, written. Do we have an 8? We do not have an 8. Item number 9, written petitions and communications. In addition to providing the opportunity for members of the public to address council in person, we do also provide an email address where they can send emails to us. Those go to all city council members. We read them as part of our packet. We do not read them aloud at the meeting, but we do accept them into the record at our regular meetings. We do have one this evening. I would entertain a motion from council to accept that e-comment into the record.
So moved.
Moved by Raymond, supported by Vreeman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item 11A, Community Energy Plan Progress Report. Mr. Van Beek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. So a real quick introduction. Community Energy Plan is a great partnership. and I'll say primarily between the City of Holland and the Holland Board of Public Works, but more importantly, it's a great partnership with many other organizations in the community, but also with our residents. One really great thing also about our community energy plan is that it's not just a plan. Councilmember Raymond mentioned earlier about a master plan, and in a lot of communities, reports are done, and sometimes those reports go on a shelf someplace and collect dust and aren't continually worked on and promoted. And part of the excitement tonight is that we're going to get a report, and you're going to see in action how the community energy plan is a living, breathing document. And partly, we really appreciate that part of that living element of that is we have a strategic development team that maybe is getting a little nerdy about all these different, acronyms that we like to use, but comes in periodically and takes a look at the original report, takes a look at how we're trending, and makes recommendations. So thank you to those SDT members that are here, but especially thank you to Andrew from the Holland Board of Public Works, who not only is a great partner. Dave Koster's here tonight at the Holland Board of Public Works, but Andrew does a great job too, and he's really good with PowerPoint presentations. So, yes, I'm letting you know that right before you start, Andrew. Welcome, and thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks, everyone. So I will go through a few slides here just to give you an update on the progress that Holland's made in the last year. I also put one of these annual reports on each of your spots at the dais, so you have this to look at as well. This is a different version of some of the same information, but it's also some background. Yeah, it's an accordion. Yeah, you got the idea. There we go. Thank you. Point it this way. That's where the computer is. So the globe on the cover of the report is intentional because obviously what we're talking about, energy and carbon emissions, this is a global issue. So obviously Holland is one piece of a much bigger effort that we're hopefully all undertaking to reduce our carbon emission and our carbon footprint. As Keith mentioned, Holland was well ahead of a lot of its peers in this effort. So all the way back in 2011 was when the first CEP report was created. And since then we've updated it. The original goal of the CEP, it's not a sustainability plan comprehensively. So there are items that you might ask are, where's recycling? Where's other things that we know are doing that are helping sustainability? They're not in this particular plan. And in some ways, that's a missed opportunity to acknowledge a lot of that great work that is happening. So Dan Broersma from the city sustainability managers here. The city parks department is doing great things on our tree canopy. Not all of that work is necessarily related to our carbon emissions that we count, but it should still be acknowledged tonight. So I want to just say that real quick. What the CEP was meant to do was ensure economic competitiveness for the city of Holland, protect the environment, obviously, and then also provide reliable and affordable energy. Those were the goals of the original CEP, and we've kind of carried those through with all the updates that we've made to it. So most recently in 2021, the SDT team had us focus on these 5 levers, what we called them. So electric portfolio, building energy consumption, transportation, education, and carbon offsets. That was kind of a attempt to look at the current science, the current trends, where the city was going, what things we knew about that were happening in development, what would help us get to the ultimate goal of the community energy plan and reducing our carbon footprint. So where do the city's emissions come from? We can't reduce them if we don't know where they're coming from. So in general, they come from 3 main sources: the use of natural gas, the use of electricity, and transportation. And so those are shown here on the chart. Obviously, we have a very big industrial contribution to our emissions in the city of Holland, but that's obviously there's pros and cons to that, which we'll talk about. But in general, this is the breakdown of how those emissions are counted. So to summarize those a little bit more again, so the yellow is electricity. That's about 50% of our emissions today. When the plan was written, electricity accounted for about 70% of the city's emissions because of the old coal plant, James D. Young. The energy that we did get from the grid at the time was more coal-based. So that's been obviously a big success story, is that electricity has shrunk as a piece of the overall pie. Natural gas is now about 1/3, and transportation is roughly 16% of our overall. It's 8 o'clock, so the math lesson's gonna go really quick. But in case anyone wanted to know how we calculate it, it's a very simple math equation. So it's energy use, kilowatt hours, times a factor, which is how much we emit per kilowatt hour we produce or we buy, and that equals tons. So tons of carbon equivalent pollution. Similarly for gas, number of therms used by an emission factor. Transportation's got one extra step, but it's still very straightforward. How many miles do the people of Holland travel based on state records and modeling? What are the fuel efficiencies of their vehicles on average? And then how much emissions come off of a gallon of gas when it's burned? Gasoline in this case. So all those get totaled up and then divided by the city population, metric tons per capita. So it's something we can track over time for Holland to see how we're doing. So when the CEP was originally published, that metric, that calculation was done by a consultant, and it was about 24 metric tons per person in Holland. That's including all the industrial, commercial, so it's not just residential. We count people, but, and that was okay. We didn't really have a community to compare that to. Not a lot of other communities did it that way, but the point is to kind of compare ourselves against ourselves, because Holland is a unique community, like all communities are. We can't say that if Detroit's is 24 metric tons per person that we're the same. It doesn't, it's to compare us against ourselves. So the important thing is where it's trending for us. And in the early years, it trended downward. So the green line is what we actually experienced in terms of a change in our metric tons per capita. So it actually decreased. The first time we updated the calculation was in 2015, and we'd moved down from 24 to 22. The original report had expected if we took no action back in 2011, it would have gone up. Between 2015 and 2018, when we updated the calculation again, we retired the James DeYoung power plant. So that was a big reason for the 22 to 19 metric ton change. We also brought Holland Energy Park online in 2018. So the combined cycle natural gas plant had much lower emissions, roughly 50% lower than the coal plant did. So that was a big change for the electric side. In 2020, we were again down to 17, but everyone who was involved in the calculation was kind of like, well, let's just wait and see, because that's a COVID year. We don't know what that year really looked like. So the most recent calculation was now in 2022, because we've been doing it on a 2-year basis, if you've caught on to that, ever since 2018. Unfortunately, this is the first time that we have not continued to trend downward. You can only build a really big, efficient power plant once in a while. You can't do it every 2 years to keep getting lower and lower. So at this point, this is kind of the first opportunity we've had to show that we can't just count on big multi-million-dollar investments to solve our energy problem or solve our emissions problem. We need to have community-wide efforts and really everyone engaged to kind of keep that number going downward. So at first glance, it looks like bad news. And you could still say, if you want to spin it, it's less than our pre-COVID year of 2018. I'm not trying to spin it, but I think there's a lot of encouraging work that is going on today in 2023 that will give us a lot of reason to expect this number to keep moving downward in the future. And I should say the goal, really quickly, the goal that we had when we originally wrote the 2010 plan was to get down to 10 metric tons by 2050. But the SDT said that's too long. We need to look at getting to approximately 12 metric tons per person by 2030, so just a few years from now. So that's the current goal, is 12.25 metric tons by 2030. An important variable in how much emissions our electricity use generates is the amount of renewables we have in our portfolio, and right now that's 16.4%. I'll mention in the next slide how that's probably going to change here relatively quickly. Another important stat in how you can reduce a community's emissions is how affordable that electricity is. So it's great if it's clean and it's emitting less than other energy sources, but if it's too expensive to use electricity, then you're not going to see people use it. So we compare ourselves with our investor-owned utility neighbors, and at least on a residential basis, and actually on all sectors, we're cheaper than the IOU partners, but residential in particular, we're roughly 40 to 50% less expensive. So again, the affordability goal of the original CEP, we're still doing very well with that. So you may have seen in the news, there have been quite a few things about energy and renewables, particularly in the news lately for Michigan. So there was recently a bill passed, which is now PA 235, to go along with all our other collection of PAs tonight. It was Senate Bill 271 when I wrote this, but it was now signed and it's now officially an act. So recall in the last slide, we're currently at 16% renewables. This would require us and all the other utilities in the state to get to 50% by 2030, and then again to 60%, and eventually to a clean energy standard, which is a more complicated discussion for another meeting, by 2040. But obviously a very quick transition for our portfolio in a relatively short time. I can tell you that we are already talking or planning to issue a request for proposals for an integrated resource plan, which is the utility version of a master plan in some ways, to kind of say, how are we going to get to these targets by these years? We're planning to put that out for bid in the early months of next year, with the expectation of being done with that within 2024, right, Dave? So by this time next year, when I come and give you another update, we will have a bit of a roadmap of how we expect to get to that 50% renewable target and beyond. But for now, that's the new target on the renewables side of things. And like I mentioned too, we've already come a long way on that emission factor. So going to more renewables will obviously continue to help, but we have already reduced that number by 50% since JDY was retired. And now I'm going to take a quick second to take a drink while it explodes. Did it in slow motion so I could drink. Okay. So that was the first lever. That was the electric portfolio. The second lever is building energy consumption. So again, remember the math. The portfolio is that emission factor, but how much of the buildings actually use is the other part of that equation. So I wanted to compare it to 2020 and 2018 again, mostly for COVID reasons, because everyone would expect it to bounce back up a little bit from where it was in 2020, and it did. So industrial use and commercial use bounced back up. Residential actually went down from 2020 to 2022. But the real number that I think we should probably focus on is the 2018 for this discussion. So industrial use did go up from where it was in 2018. We've had a lot of growth in industrial customers since 2018, so that's not entirely unexpected. But there is the good news of how commercial and residential have come down even from pre-COVID levels of electric use. So it's tempting to say, why isn't industrial pulling their weight? Like I said, there has been growth, and that's reflected in that number. And I'll show you on the next slide a little bit more of the details of why they are pulling their weight, and there's a lot behind that number. But overall, the change from electricity use, if you blend all those different individual sectors together, is a 6% increase from where we were in the middle of COVID, or in the beginning of COVID, and essentially flat from where we were in 2018, which is an amazing success story in and of itself. This is my Christmas chart, and it shows a lot. I probably could have made this my one slide in my whole presentation, and you would have thanked me for it, but too late. So what this shows is our top 50 electric customers in one view. And they're red or green based on whether they increased energy use from 2018 to 2022 or decreased. So red, not that it's bad, I had to pick one. Red is increased their energy use, and green is decreased. So each individual square or rectangle is an individual company. So to give you an example of what I mean, so this top left square, that company used 22 million more kilowatt hours in 2022 than they did in 2018. And for that individual company, that represented a 49% increase in what their energy demands were, which is big. You'd see the one below it increased 240%. So it was a smaller company, but the total result was also about 22 million kilowatt hours more. Kind of see where we're going with that. Similarly, the green ones reduced where they were versus 2018. So in this case, about a 6 million kilowatt hour reduction for this company, which was about a 29% reduction, which is huge for 4 years. It's not that the green squares are doing efficiency projects and the red squares aren't. Like I said, a lot of the red is growth, companies that invested a lot and also did efficiency on things they either put in or already had. But what this ends up doing is when you add all these green and red together, if you kind of have them like offset each other, that's where you get about that 3% increase from 2018 to 2022. So you look at that 3% number and think, they're all just going up a little bit because they're lazy. And you look at this and you say, wait a minute, we're all over the place. They just all add together and get 3%. But if you look at the number of squares that are green versus number that are red, that's really encouraging to me, because the vast majority of the companies are reducing their use. Whether they're taking advantage of our rebates or not, for this purpose, for this presentation tonight, doesn't matter to me. It's helping drive the energy use down. So I think that's a very encouraging sign for the future. Next. Natural gas. Similar approach. I don't have the breakdown by company to show you who's doing what. There are some much bigger numbers on this graph, and I can't explain all of them. Semco Energy's customer classes are broken down a little differently. I organize them from biggest use per account to smallest. But you can see that all of the sectors went up from COVID to now. If you look at 2018, it was a little bit better, but the biggest customers used a lot more than even they did in pre-COVID times. Transport customers is basically a wholesale customer, just to leave it at that. But if you blend all those together again, like I did with electric, gas use was up 20% from 2020. So that alone explains basically that entire 1 metric ton increase, was the amount of more natural gas that was burned by all customers of all types between 2 years ago and now. If you look at that same number versus 2018, it really only increased a little bit. So that's that COVID impact. There's a little more weather and natural gas use, but that's not enough to explain a 20% increase. Transportation. Go faster, sorry. If you recall the pieces of that equation, were vehicle miles traveled, fuel efficiency, and the emissions for gasoline, or for, in some cases, the different fuel, if it's not gasoline, if it's an electric vehicle. It's tempting to think, if we take gas vehicles off the road and put electric ones on, then we're just doing the emissions somewhere else, and it's just offsetting each other. That's not the case. This chart shows the different emissions on average. This is a national average, but it's pretty close to what our electric emissions would be, so I used it. The emissions of a gasoline vehicle on the far right are about 3 to 4 times more than an electric vehicle, driving the same number of miles, just being fueled by those 2 different energy sources. So if we can take gas vehicles off the road and convert them to electric, even if they don't drive any less miles, we're doing well from a carbon perspective. Because yeah, we're adding 2 tons of carbon from electricity use perspective, but we're taking 6 tons from gasoline use out of the equation. So we get a net gain every time we convert 1 gas vehicle to an electric vehicle. That gets even better as our renewable portfolio grows to 50% and 60% and 100%, because then that electricity goes from 2 tons added to 1 ton to no tons. So there's no reason to wait. It's already in our interest to convert vehicles to electric, but it will only get better. To help customers realize that and to help them do that, in the next month or 2 at the most, we're going to be adding some new modules to BPW's website that let customers estimate what the costs for their particular commute and the particular vehicle they might even be considering will be. So they can plug in, I want to buy a Kia EV9 and my commute is 20 miles a day. How much am I going to pay on EV or on BPW's electric rates versus how much am I going to pay if gas is $3.25 a gallon? And it'll show them the charts, and basically they can just make the decision for themselves. Yeah, the carbon is it's one of the tabs on the calculator that shows them what that impact is in terms of a per household metric tons kind of perspective. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So we'll also be adding modules for calculating solar. If they want to put solar panels on their house as well as a different module, but the transportation one for tonight is the one I wanted to highlight. So very straightforward, and spoiler, it's cheaper to do electric. I won't ask the mayor to break down his costs, but he's probably ready to if
I won't, but I want to let you know that there was, before I bought my electric vehicle, there was a similar calculator on the BPW's website that I used to compare what I was paying in gasoline for my Ram 1500 with a V8 Hemi versus what it cost me in electricity for my Mustang, and that was the only thing I needed to see to
Yeah, that
purchase the
was
car.
right. Pretty straightforward.
The Mustang's faster than the Ram 1500 too. We'll get into this after the meeting, Mr. Corbin.
So obviously the fourth lever is education. That's one of the biggest ones for my day-to-day job, promoting our efficiency rebates. And so we do this as many different ways as we can. We're going into classrooms and talking to Holland Public and Holland Christian and Black River and every student we can get into the classroom and talk to. Kids are really excited about this, as evidenced by the picture. We're having events in city parks to promote electric lawn tools. We're going to National Night Out, other events the city is holding. We're planting trees to reduce energy use around people's homes in partnership with the City Parks Department. We did a home energy expo at the Civic Center back in October, just a few weeks ago. Had hundreds of people come through and learn about heat pumps and other efficient technologies. So we're getting out there as many ways as we can. Other than events, we're running monthly articles in the Sentinel, which I'm sure you've seen. We're doing a monthly newsletter to all of our residential accounts that's opened and read by 50% of the thousands that we send it to, so that's a really good venue for us to get our word out. We're doing training with industrial customers. So this was a compressed air, all-day, 8-hour training we did at the beginning of the year. And they're very receptive in coming to those as well. We have a really good response rate with those. Home Energy 101, I'd love to talk more about it, but we don't have time tonight, but that's a new program we launched last year around this time. Dan Broersma and I work on that program very closely together. So it's a home energy education program, as the title indicates. And it's another one where we're working with partners, a lot of the same ones we've seen on slides tonight. But right now it's roughly 10 community partners helping us get the word out about energy savings. And we've had over 300 homes go through that already. One of the great metrics from that program is that once someone goes through that program, they're 12 times more likely than their neighbor who hasn't done it to do a BPW rebate after the fact. So that means they're learning about efficiency, they're understanding that it's valuable to them, and they're actually acting on that. So that's one of the best stats that we have so far on that program. And the final lever here is carbon offsets. So there's a couple ways that carbon offsets can be involved in the CEP calculation, and they're becoming much more important to the calculation than they used to be. So in a nutshell, this is a way for customers to buy renewable energy when they don't necessarily have it on their own property. So they can either buy that from the BPW, and we can go out and buy energy from those renewable sources on their behalf, and then we don't get to count that against our renewable percentage. We just retire it on the customer's name in that case. Or if they're a big enough industrial customer, they can go out and do that transaction themselves with third parties on the market and buy renewable energy. So anytime, if you've heard any press release in the last 10 years about a company going 100% renewable, this is probably how they've done it. They don't have solar panels all over their roof. There's not enough space in a lot of these big customers to do that. So they have to buy these products on the market. A few years ago when we were doing the carbon calculations, no companies were doing this, or at least none that we knew about, and so this didn't help our carbon calculation. So, but now, companies have started to buy these either from us, as you'll see in the brochure, it's not a typo, we've sold 3,700% more of this than we did a couple years ago. But they're also buying it from third parties, and when they let us know that, we can take account and give them credit where credit is due in our carbon calculations, because that's effectively like powering their building with 100% renewable electricity before we have that to offer them. So that rightly reduces their carbon emissions. So the more buildings that do that, we'll just see those benefits in the future. And I can tell you, if that wasn't for carbon offsets this year, we would be 1 metric ton per capita higher than we are. So it's having a real effect. But also I wanted to throw out that there's also a way for individuals to buy those kind of carbon credits in a way, or at least put their money where their mouth is in terms of reducing carbon, and that's the Carbon Fund, the Community Carbon Fund that was started by ODC and the Community Foundation. So if you search Community Carbon Fund, you'll find this, but it's a way to actually put money into carbon reducing projects locally here within the Community Foundation's footprint. So read more about that. And it's in the brochure. So, last slide. Looking ahead, if a lot of the things that we expect to happen, where are we going to be related to the goal? So if that 50% renewables is achieved, like we expect it to by 2030, that would take our per capita emissions, if we assume just some relatively normal level of growth between now and then in electric sales, from 17 down to 14 metric tons per capita. If we can convert a couple thousand vehicles by then to electric, again with the new electric portfolio we're going to have, that would be another half of a ton. Energy efficiency, electrification, other things that we're actively promoting right now can get us even farther. So we're really in good shape for getting to 12.25 metric tons by 2030. Obviously a lot needs to happen between now and then, but it's not like we don't know what to do to get there and we're just going to throw out a really nice goal that looks good and hope we get there. We have a plan and we have programs that the city and BPW have in place to actually, I think, get us there by 2030. So it's really encouraging news for me, and I hope for you all as well. And that's all I got for tonight. So that's going to fall over to you. But any questions?
Questions? Yeah. Well done. Questions? Mr. Byrd.
One question. So on your educational slide, you talked about all the classes you give. Where are those located? Are they at the Civic Center, BPW, or here? Where
Yeah,
are they all
so
located?
it's a mix. So the big event we did, the expo, was at the Civic Center. But the Home Energy 101 lessons are in your home with you, and then the educator comes to you.
Okay.
So that you're actually learning tips about your own home, and they're pointing literally to things that you could do to improve your home's energy efficiency.
Okay, so those are catered to, they're all different.
They're all different.
Okay.
One of the reasons, the many reasons we partner with nonprofits is to kind of enhance the trust factor there, so that you might be more willing to have someone that you work with at a certain agency come into your home, because we've trained them on energy efficiency. You might want someone who speaks Spanish to come into your home. We have that opportunity as well with the partnership with La Houppe as one of the partners. So trying to reduce any hurdles for individuals and giving them lots of different ways into the programs.
So have you found that to be a challenge, getting in homes?
I think we've done better than we thought.
Okay.
I mean, 300 homes in a year, our goal was 250, and we thought that was a stretch.
Okay.
So the partners have been a huge part of that, because obviously then they're spreading the word about it's not just, you don't have to get the BPW newsletter to hear about it. You can hear about it from all these different organizations that
So
are then.
word of mouth has been
Exactly.
really good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for asking
All right, thank you.
that. Yeah.
Mr. Corbin.
Well, I think to add to that is our partnering organizations are the ones actually going and doing it too, right? Or training the trainer, or
Oh, yeah.
teaching them how to go
Yeah.
into the homes and work with their clients and such to do that. So I think it's a
Yeah.
wonderful experience. So 3,000 cars, right?
Yeah.
So how would we account for those? Work with the DMV? Would we work with maybe the car dealerships in the area and say, or would you have like a volunteer registration across the city and say, hey, if you got an electric vehicle, just register it with, or voluntarily sign up and tell us that you have it and we know about it.
Even
How do
easier
you do
than that. So the Secretary of State's office, we have it, BPW has a data sharing agreement with the Secretary of State that we put into place about a year ago, so that we can get anonymized data on the zip code level of how many EVs are registered with the Secretary of State in the 49423 and 49424 zip code, so that we can see that every year and how it's been doubling. So the 3,000 wasn't just a wild stab, it was actually a pretty conservative, if we keep doubling by 2030, where will we be? But we'll be able to check that every year with Secretary of State data, so we won't need people to voluntarily tell us that. Yeah.
Other questions? Mr. Schulteis.
Yeah, appreciate the data dump. Is great stuff. And really, the proof is in the pudding and the results that are being obtained, so thanks. Thinking about future investment, potential needs, is there a tipping point where we're talking about increased EVs and residential charging where BPW's infrastructure is challenged, whether it's neighborhood transformers, something to that effect?
I don't think we have a specific tipping point calculated per se. We're obviously evaluating that. It's a different type of load than what a lot of our peaks are now. So it's not like you're adding something on top of necessarily 100%, because it could go in at night when you're charging, and that might be, yeah.
Yeah, that's
You're
what
not
I,
walking up to smack me in the back of the head.
yeah, sorry, that's what I was going to add. Is that, no, not at all. No.
And Mr. Coster, we all know who you are, but I'm not sure everybody
I'm
watching
Dave
does.
Coster, General Manager of the Holland BPW. Thank you for that question. Yeah, one of the things that we have done already with our incentives on home charging is that to get the $300 rebate for the charging in your home, you have to sign up for the time of use rate. And the time of use rate is really incentivizing the usage at a time that is complementary to the grid right now. Now, there's going to be a lot changing over the next several years if you look at the intensity of solar on systems as well. That could create some concentration of power output at times. EVs, as they grow, they're going to get to a point where, yeah, distribution level is going to have to be continually looked at. And so I expect that we will have to make some incremental updates. But, you know, we are already kind of doing that as we underground or change and upgrade our, we've taken a lot of 1/aught cable out and renewed it over the last few years. We're already thinking about, you know, upgrading and trying to get prepared, doing something a little bit more incremental to get ready for that. So, but you're exactly right. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah,
Well,
Mr.
listen,
Corbin.
I'd be interested also to work from home. There's many more people working from home than they were prior to 2020. So it'd be interesting to find out a little bit of those statistics and how that might play into this, lowering the carbon footprint. I don't know what we would gain from that other than knowledge of if they were back in the workforce. That may not be so of a pleasant graph to see.
Yeah.
That might have a bigger increase by them not working from home.
Yeah, I was expecting to see a bigger change from 2018 to 2020 and 2022, but there wasn't a huge change. Honestly, it was interesting too, in the vehicle miles traveled that we get from the state, that didn't drop too much, even during COVID times. People found somewhere, whether they were just going for a drive, because where were they going? I don't know. Everything was closed, but they were still driving, unfortunately. So, yeah, it wasn't as big as what I would have expected. I think partially it's because industrial is still so much of a bigger piece. Yeah.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And no action necessary on this, just this is for information.
Yeah,
correct?
just for information. And, you know, Andrew always says this, but every time he does a PowerPoint, he kind of delivers, doesn't he?
It's
he
phenomenal.
So sorry,
PowerPoints.
Andrew, we're going to start doing it. Just keep doing it to you. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, these guys are serious too. As a community, I'm with these guys. They're fun to be around, but they do a great job.
Yep.
Great job.
Next item on our agenda, item 12E 4.1, financial audit for fiscal year 2023. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you. And I will keep moving here, but I will say, you know, we've had multiple things tonight, and it's kind of an interesting kind of reflection, at least for me, where when you take a look at the master plan, doesn't happen every year, right? It periodically comes in front of you, but it's a very important document and process that you might just see once, but it's ongoing and very important work that your staff does on behalf of you. Community Energy Plan is another fantastic example of a very, you know, big boulder type, priority type thing. That work happens all the time, but you might only see kind of a glimpse into it once. Well, the audit is that thing too, and it happens every year, but there's a tremendous amount of work that happens every day, and then you kind of ramp up right before audit time. And huge thanks to both our city staff and our BPW staff, and also our auditor, who Lynn will introduce here momentarily. But I always say at this time, there are some communities that when they get their audit, they might just put it on a consent agenda or just kind of say, hey, the audit looks good and we have an unmodified opinion and like everything's good. We don't, and hopefully at least while I'm here, we won't do that here, because it is foundationally one of the most important things that you do as 9 elected officials, to have overview and insight on and make sure that we're presenting our financials correctly. So thank you very much again to our staff and to Paul Matz from Raymond for staying with us tonight. Hopefully you'll learn some interesting things about the city of Holland. But Lynn, why don't you come on up, and then I know you'll say a few things, introduce Paul, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. So we've saved this exciting report for the end of the evening. I know the anticipation's been really great. So I want to follow up with, I agree with Keith's comments about how much time it takes. So I do thank the staff of the Finance Department, both at the city and the Board of Public Works. We work together on this project, and it does take quite some time, but we have a great staff, and for that I'm truly appreciative. And it's also, I also want to thank the staff of Raymond Robson. They come out, they're very professional, they are friendly, they're nice to work with, and not only do they help us during the audit, but during the year sometimes we give them a call. When you may have heard, there's a lot of these GASB pronouncements that come up, and they require a lot of technical information to implement, so we'd rather check beforehand than wait till the end of the year. So we give them a call, and they're always very responsive, and we're very appreciative of that. So Paul is going to walk us through this document, 269 pages, and then I'm going to come back and share a little something with you after he goes through his presentation. Thank you, Paul, for coming to present. And
no good. Thank you, Lynn, and good evening, Council. It is a pleasure to be here. And I do appreciate your comments. I can't tell you how many times I see the audit come up on the screen or on the agenda, and there is a collective groan in the audience. I appreciate, the city does take it seriously. We did have the opportunity a little bit earlier this afternoon to meet with the audit committee as well. So we're able to go through things in a little bit more detail, have some good, robust conversation. So you may give your thanks or your sympathies to the group who already sat through this once. But we'll try to keep our comments a little bit more high level and brief this evening. So our goal as part of the financial statement audit is to make sure that the financial statements are accurately stated in all material respects. We want them to be useful for this group as part of the decision-making processes that you make as being part of City Council. So we do many tests of transactions, of balances, both for the year-end balances as of June 30, 2023, and then also the activity that takes place during the year, with an ultimate goal then to issue our opinion as far as whether we believe those are accurately stated financial statements. We also look at the system of internal controls, sort of, are there segregation of duties, are there independent reviews and approvals taking place, and where we would identify findings or comments or recommendations, we would share those as part of the audit information as well. Sort of at a very high level, from our perspective, the audit went very well this year. You have an outstanding management team that we work with on the finance side. They are really a pleasure to work with, timely as far as providing information, responding to requests, and they just do a very good job with the day-to-day accounting and getting ready for audit. So kudos and our thanks to everybody that we've worked with at the city. As you can see on the PowerPoint, what we issued this year was the unmodified or clean audit opinion. That means that, yes, we believe that these financial statements are accurately stated in all material respects. And again, that's the best opinion, the highest opinion, the opinion you want to achieve as part of the audit process. There were a couple of audit findings that came out from our work this year. But just they really related to the work that we do at the Holland Board of Public Works. So what we typically do is, given the volume of information there, we typically spend a couple of weeks working with the Holland Board of Public Works and on their financial information specifically, and then we work here over at City Hall. So we did have two items that came out as part of the work we did at the Holland Board of Public Works regarding some audit adjustments that were identified and some recommendations regarding some more timely reconciliations. We've discussed those items at length with management and the audit committee at the Board of Public Works. We also discussed them this evening, and I know that there are already plans in place by management to address a couple of items that we noted during those procedures. But from the perspective of the work we did at City Hall, no audit findings, no matters of concern related to any of those procedures. A couple of items in the financial statements that I wanted to make sure I brought your attention to that you might have particular interest. As it was mentioned, these are 269 pages of information. So I wanted to maybe mention a couple that you may have some particular interest in. Starting on page 9, there's a document called the transmittal letter. This is a document that management prepares and provides a lot of good narrative information regarding what was done, what was accomplished with the funds during the year. It goes beyond, just being page after page of number, but gets in a little bit more information regarding who the City of Holland is, and again, some of the accomplishments, some of the awards during the year. So as a section I'll always encourage a board to read through in detail. Starting on page 23 is the independent auditor's report. As I mentioned, we will issue an opinion on the financial statements, and that's what you'll find on those couple of pages. And again, that's the clean, unmodified audit opinion. And then starting on a couple pages after that is the management's discussion and analysis. That starts on page 28. This is another section that is just really a handful of pages, and it boils down the results for the year in some summary tables and summary charts. There's comparative information to June 30 of 2022, so if you're interested in fluctuations and trends between years, there's a lot of good information there. And again, this is another document that management helps with a lot of the narrative, talks about some budget to actual differences and the like. So again, is always a section that if you don't want to get lost in the full 270 pages is a really good section to spend a few minutes with. Moving into just a couple of numbers to share with you. First of all, focusing on the general fund. You can find this information if you're interested on pages 44 and 46 of the financial statements. But the total fund balance at the end of the year for the general fund was $11,408,801. You can see that there is a little bit, just shy of 1.8 million of that amount that is essentially the budget stabilization portion that's included in that general fund balance. There was a total increase in fund balance for the general fund of $3,007,896 for the year. I shared here a couple of percentages and a couple of ratios just to provide a little bit more information regarding the general fund balance, how that compares to the total expenditures and transfers that took place during the general fund during the year. And again, so you can see the couple of percentages there depending on whether we include or did not include the budget stabilization amounts that I thought might be helpful just to put that ending fund balance in some perspective. I also wanted to share briefly regarding the American Rescue Plan Act fund. Of course, the city received a substantial amount related to that program. At the end of fiscal year 2023, there was about $7.2 million that was still remaining to be spent at that time. And during the fiscal year, there was about $1.2 million in funds applied towards that grant program. And I think the last set of numbers I wanted to share with you was regarding the net pension liability. And this is just a number that tends to be of some interest, and I know it fluctuates a little bit between years. And I specifically wanted to just share, in case you were curious about the balance this year compared to last year, it is about $32.1 million of a liability at the end of 2023. Which is up from about $5.8 million at the end of 2022. Of course, this is This does include the Holland Board of Public Works portion, so I think that's important to note. But really what that was driven by was just the investment loss that MERS incurred during the calendar year 2022 that largely contributed to that increase in the net pension liability. But I know that is something that, as we talked about in the audit committee, the city has done a lot, taken a lot of steps to try to address that liability. Those are the items I specifically wanted to mention, but if there's questions, I would be most happy to try to answer.
Mr. Byrd, did you have questions?
Yeah, can you go back one slide?
Of course.
Looking at that date there, June 2012, I'm assuming that's a typo, correct?
That is 2022, or 22, yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much. Action on this requires.
Lynn
I'm
wants
sorry,
to
you've got
give you
more.
one
Oh,
more thing.
Can I
You know
have
what?
one
There
more
is
minute?
stuff I know there's stuff you want to share.
I know, right? So this is a great report for all of those, and it's available online. But some people don't have the time to read 269 pages. So if you'd like to get a good idea about how the city finances work, we have started a couple years ago, the popular annual financial report. It too will be out there online, available, 14 pages. It's not audited. It's not audited, but just saying, 14 pages, a lot of good information, gives you a summary of the, yeah, exactly. So.
Have you received any awards for the popular annual financial report?
Actually, we have. So we were fortunate. Thank you. So actually, the city's been very diligent with their finances for many, many years and has won an award for this report for 31 years. And that's important because it's not just because we won an award, but we'll take the award. But it helps you get the document in a manner that a lot of people use this document. Think about it, when we just got our rating for the new bonds that we issued. It's very important that we have this document in this format with all of this information. And every year we actually have to send updated audit to the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, because we have to do that as part of our debt agreement. So, but this one was relatively new. We introduced 3 years ago, and so the first 2 years have been submitted, and we did receive the award for this report as well. So we're going to submit these again for this year. So.
Great, thank you, and congratulations on that. And I apologize, I was taken a little off guard that you finished the report, because I was looking at the POFR. I'm part of the audit committee, so I'd already gone through the audit numbers. I'm like, I'm going to scroll through the POFR again, and it is riveting reading and very, very informative for members of the public.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the financial audit for fiscal year 2023?
Are we receiving it or approving it?
Approve.
Well, the wording in the recommendation is accept.
So, do you
Then
accept
I
the
would
recommendation?
move that we accept the recommendation from
All
this
right.
office.
Moved by Freeman, supported by Byrd. Any discussion from council members? All right, seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin? Yes. Sol?
Yes.
Rowan?
Yes.
Shay?
Yes.
Schultheis?
Yes.
Bird?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item, 12E 6.1, gifts. Kathy, would you please review the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts. Downtown Group, Windmill Island Gardens, a donation of $500 was received from Tom and Patricia Grosco in support of various programs. Department of Public Safety Services, Gerard and Nancy Jo Claver donated $500 to support the city's Honor Guard program. Department of Parks and Recreation, a $1,000 donation has been received from John A. Vandenbosch Company in support of the Van Raalte Farm Dog Park, and $150 from Sarah Simmons toward the Van Raalte Farm Park. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Great, thank you, Kathy. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the gifts?
Move to approve said gifts with a token of our appreciation.
Moved by Sol, is there support?
Support.
Support by Rowan, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 843, item 13, communications from the city manager.
Yeah, for the newer council members, that happens sometimes. That's my cue to go fast. Handful of things. One, you received an email from Mallory now, but just a reminder, please respond, just so we know that all 9 of you can come. But next regular council meeting on 12/20, please come early and looking your best for your picture, please. Tomorrow is the employee holiday luncheon, something that we always enjoy to do. City Hall and other offices will be closed, extended from 11:45 until 1:15. Not our emergency operations, obviously. So would love to, if you're able, to show up at the Holland Civic Center place at 12 o'clock tomorrow, but operations are closed from 11:45 to 1:15. Just show up. Not for the public. Sorry, people. The RFP, the request for proposals for Holland Civic Center Place, has been posted, so that is out there, and those are due back. We bumped it to January 5, 2024. And then, in addition to, you got the Community Energy Plan report tonight. We've got postcards for Coffee with Council, but potentially the thing that citizens get most excited about is the calendar for 2024 is out, will be being spread out in mailboxes, and we also have some limited supplies in other city locations. But fantastic work again by our media team. But I'm not going to show you the pictures. You have to go and look at the calendar yourself. And that's all I have.
3 minutes, that's impressive. Next item on the agenda, appointments, communications from the mayor. I do have appointments for council liaisons to boards, committees, and commissions. Just for the public, we do this every 2 years. Council members give me their desired appointments and what they would prefer to do, what they're willing to do, and what they would rather not do. I tried to get as many people into things that they preferred to do. If you didn't get what you preferred to do, you got what you were willing to do. And I don't think anybody got something that they said that they were unwilling to do. I did my very best with that. But I would recommend that City Council appoint council liaisons to boards, commissions, and committees for the period of 2023 to 2025, effective immediately, and appoint Council Member Raymond as the ex officio voting member of the Planning Commission for a 2-year term. And I would entertain a motion from council to that effect.
So moved.
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support? Support by Sol. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Nathan, sorry, just a question on your clarity.
Certainly.
Did you say Raymond or Vreeman?
I said Vreeman. I think I said Vreeman. Was it you?
No, for the 2-year appointment.
The 2-year appointment is Raymond.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Raymond for that appointment. Okay, clarification on that. Still good on the motion.
Yes.
Still good on the support. And we don't actually have to do a roll call vote on this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Van Beek.
And I will just let you know, for those of you that are continuing in service on a board, committee, commission, you'll hear us say BCC, and you'll go, what is BCC? It's a board, committee, commission. We kind of group them together. If you're continuing your service, you won't hear anything new. If you are newly appointed to a board, committee, or commission, you can expect over the next several weeks to be reached out to by the staff liaison that is responsible for that particular, and we'll have conversations with you and get you onboarded and oriented.
Great. Thank you. That's all I have this evening. Next item, appointments, motions, communications from council members. Anything from council members this evening? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Rowan. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Vreeman and Raymond. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.